did,
Sorry, Claire, were you going to say something? We lost you.
I was going to say something, but I actually stopped myself. But I was just interested in whether that chat was being broadcast to all panelists and all attendees, or just panelists. And then I've just, and it's a mixture of both.
Yes, you can check. So yeah, I'm going to, when we start, I will just explain about the chat. So I'm just aware we're at 4:30 now, like UK time. And so hopefully, Saki, shall we just text, do we have, can we text him maybe, Susie, or shall we just start, or shall we wait
I've emailed him. I think we can go ahead and get started since he's a respondent. Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got a few more participants. Maybe we can wait like a minute or so, because more people are joining in.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so yeah, shall we start then? Is that okay? Okay, thank you all for being here. It's still, I'm Irini from Future Everything, by the way, and I still find it really bizarre that I can't see everybody who is here, but it's nice that at least I can see a list of names of our attendees. So I just wanted to say that if you haven't used Zoom before, please feel free to use the chat that you can see. You can see the option at the bottom of your screen. You just to say hi, or like to say where you're joining from, etc., so that we know that you are here. That would be really nice since we can't see each other. So yeah, this is the first session of a new program that we launched, that we're launching today at Future Everything, Future Focus, and it's our, let's say, it's our new online space for critical conversations, for talks, debates, but also we are hoping to do other activities from workshops, collaboration, networking, etc. So we are trying to keep the format quite flexible and open. As many other organizations, we had to move like some of our events online, but actually this is something that we've been meaning to do for a while now. And the purpose of, I should say, the purpose of Future Focus is to enable a space for us and our audiences as well, and our collaborators and artists, etc., to help us explore collectively, but also respond to ideas about the world at times of crisis. So this is not to say that these series of events are specific to what is happening now, to the pandemic, but which of course has created devastation for so many people and communities across the globe. And of course, it has impacted significantly our sector as well. But it's more to think more broadly about ongoing challenges from environmental, humanitarian, financial, etc., and to try and create critical discourse, but also exchange and inspire actions for hopefully creating a better place, better future. So, so we're very, very pleased that the launch of this program is with this series of conversations that starting today, and provocations with the brilliant editors, Susie and Victoria, and of course the authors from Art Hack Practice, and some guests as well. And I don't know if you have seen the Art Hack Practice publication. It's a really, really great collection of, or toolkit and collection of contributions. So highly recommend to check it out. So, and particularly this session is exploring shifting spaces of production, labor and artistic practice in a precarious kind of state. But I will leave Susie and Victoria to say a bit more, and of course to introduce our amazing speakers and contributors and respondents today. But also just very quickly to say so that you are very welcome to ask questions throughout the session. And you can please use the Q&A box that you can see at the bottom of your screen. And we will collect the questions and try to answer as many as possible. But also, as I said before, please feel free to use the chat and just say who you are, just send us messages or like say where you're kind of joining from, etc. And of course, if you want to share anything that you're looking forward to during this series of events. So I'm not going to say anymore because we have a tight schedule. So Susie and Victoria, thank you so much. And I'll leave you to introduce the session and our amazing panelists.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Irini. And thank you all for coming today. I can't see you, but I'm absolutely thrilled to pieces that people are kind of joining us and are here to kind of, for our first session of Art Hack Practice Future Focus. We're Susie O'Hara and Victoria Bradbury, the editors of the very recently published book, Art Hack Practice, Intersection of Art, Innovation and the Maker Movement. And just to give you a little bit of background, Art Hack Practice is a book that brings together 26 different authors from across the world, all of whom are operating at the very blurring edges of critical new media art practice and curatorial practice. And when we were talking to Irini about potentially launching the Future Focus series, we could not think of a better group of people to bring together than our community of authors from Art Hack Practice. So thank you all so much for giving this a whirl and taking part. As a creative community, we all work in a field where technologies and the tools of our trade are constantly shifting, constantly updating. So we're really used to being super adaptable in our field. But even so, it is a strange thought to think that Art Hack Practice, was released less than 6 months ago, but is now officially a historic record of pre-COVID art and technology practices, which is just a really interesting thought. And so here today on the 13th of May, 2020, as our global lockdown is easing in various different ways, we're shifting our thinking from the book as this collection and compilation of different artistic practices that have been emerging on the periphery of advancing technologies, and viewing it more as an important resource that can potentially help us navigate our understanding of our reality that we're going through right now, but also potentially envision a post-pandemic future. So this event, Where Do We Work, is the first in a series of 3 Future Focus events that have provided us with an amazing opportunity to do something positive during this crisis. So I just want to thank Irini and your amazing team of Future Everything for, first of all, hosting this and enabling us to do something that we wanted to do since the beginning of this project, which is bring together this wonderful cohort of international contributors, many of whom have not met each other before, alongside amazing kind of respondents from the wider field to reconsider Art Hack Practice in light of this pandemic and explore the relevance that it has in terms of shaping our field moving forward.
Thanks, Susie. As Susie mentioned, today we're discussing this theme of where do we work? This theme is a direct response to the fact that many of us are currently working from home. However, it's also inspired by those artists and creatives represented in the Art Hack Practice book, whose practices are rooted in alternative context for production. So here we find ourselves in an alternative context for production, many of us in our homes. And while this question of where do we work might at first seem simple because there's an obvious answer, we're working at home, there's complexities that arise when we consider things like the ways in which the economic crisis due to COVID-19 has exposed the precariousness of freelance arts and creative workers and adjunct faculty. The notion that value has been radically realigned in our societies. Those at the lower and lowest end of the financial spectrum are now seen as key workers to keeping our societies running, while those at the higher end of salaries have receded into the shadows, receded home to work. Artistic output is being streamed into our homes at unprecedented levels. What does this mean for the arts and who's benefiting? What have we lost without access to the physical spaces to make work? Art Hack Practice talks a lot about these alternative physical spaces for production. So maker spaces, universities where you have interdisciplinary labs, commercial spaces where artists and commercial practitioners are working together. So what does this fact that we're working from home and where things will go in the future mean for artistic and creative practices as we hopefully emerge from this moment? And then this idea that our understanding of home is shifting as we're doing more work here, as we're taking on, many of us are taking on care responsibilities in parallel to the work that we're doing, and what will the longer term impact of these changes look like? So there's lots to discuss. I'd like to begin by introducing our panelists, and our first presenter will be Hannah Redler, or presenters will be Hannah Redler-Hawes and Julie Freeman, and they're going to kick us off, and I'll just read a short bio of the both of them before they get started with their presentations. Hannah Redler-Hawes is a London-based independent curator and producer specializing in contemporary art, new media, and participation, and is director of the Data as Culture art program at the Open Data Institute. And Julie Freeman is an artist who explores relationships between science, data, and the natural world. She is founder of Data as Culture and art associate at the Open Data Institute. Her work is at translatingnature.org. So I'll hand it over to them for the first presentation. Julie, we aren't able to hear you. I think
I just realized that. I'm
There
so
we go.
busy trying to share my screen. All right. So I'm Julie Freeman, one half of the duo that Victoria just introduced. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what Data as Culture is and who the Open Data Institute are, because that's where we were working and have been working when we wrote the chapter for the book. And I'm an artist. I work heavily in technology and with data, and the Open Data Institute was appealing to me when it started. It was started by Tim Berners-Lee and Nigel Shadbolt, and they wanted an institute that would help people understand the relevance and importance of data and of sharing it and of transparency and how we can build trustworthy data ecosystems. So it made sense that if there was an organisation doing this, it was important that artists have a voice as part of that organisation's identity. And so I founded the Data as Culture programme, and as part of the programme we commission artists to create work. We try and engage sort of diverse audiences that the ODI wouldn't normally into the idea of using data as an art material, and also to sort of probe it critically and sometimes playfully with different artworks. So the ODI is about 50 people or so. It flexes up and down depending on what projects are on. And often they have big events. They have an annual summit where we get together and we include art within that. We work in an office space. So unlike normal commissioning organisations, we don't have a gallery as such. And the artwork is placed in and around the office, which makes it an interesting challenge at times, because we work with staff on a daily basis and then we have visitors coming through. So it's a really unusual audience in that it's not always a gallery going sort of purposeful public. And what we try and do through the art programme is ask certain questions. So as well as data being used for part of the, to work with organisations, to work with academia, and to work with the third sector, we also ask questions about what does it mean on a cultural level. So these are the kind of questions on the slides that you can see. And I'll just hand over to Hannah now, and she'll talk to you a little bit more about some of our more recent artworks that we've commissioned.
Yeah, so copy that is our current exhibition, which is a non-exhibition now because it's in a closed office that probably won't open before the exhibition has to come down again. But it was a project, it is a research and development theme that we set ourselves for 2019 and 2020 to think about surplus data in an age of repetitive duplication, to think about notions of the myth of the perfect digital copy, of precision, and sort of hook lines of publicly facing projects. How true is the data used? So we're looking at the benefits and pitfalls of simulation, the purpose and trustworthiness of incessantly reproduced data. And it involved a big artist brainstorm where we really explored the theme quite broadly, from which we invited artists to make proposals. And we've got quite a lot of proposals still under development and unfunded, still interested in partners, but we have got four actually bodies of work that are on display in the office at the moment. So if you don't mind, the next slide, please, Jos. So Mood Pinball is by Ben Neal, E.G. Joe Murray and Harmeet Chagga Khan, who are all based in the West Midlands. And we created this as part of a project with the University of Southampton on their data stories project, where they're looking at the different stories data tells. And they came to us to talk about how different communities might use data to express their needs or explore their needs. And we thought, well, we need to go to a community. So we approached BOM in Birmingham Open Media, and we asked them if we could work with some of their associate artists and some of their community groups. And they proposed we work with those 3 artists and also with a community of neurodiverse adults in the West Midlands. So we did a series of workshops with neurodiverse adults, and one of the participants, E.G. Joe Murray, was also an artist, so she joined the artist to help make this outcome, which is a pinball machine. It's actually a real pinball machine with a digital face that you play. You click the actual flippers, although they're digital. You've got real buttons to click them, and you get sent on a non-goal orientated reflective experience where you get a neurodiverse experience of the city. Next slide, please, Jos. We've also developed with our R&D team at the Open Data Institute. Alistair Gentry was an artist in residence, and he developed DocsBox TrustSpot, which is an interactive one-to-one performance that asks you questions about which data you share about yourself. Next slide, please. And Mr. G is a poet, and he created his first ever digital artwork with us, which engages with Brexit through the piece Bring Me My Fire Truck, where he runs William Blake's famous poem through the 24 different languages of the European Union, and it gets corrupted and it gets evolved and it gets funny and it gets frightening, and it really becomes a metaphor for cultural exchange. We've got to break up now, I think, but I would say very quickly that we're in the process, because those physical works, of thinking how they can work online and really noticing the fact that they are still very, very relevant. They, you know, Alistair Gentry's DocsBox can look at how we're sharing health data. Mr. G's work deals with Brexit, and Mood Pinball deals with, you know, alternative experiences of cities. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you so much, Hannah and Julie. That was a fantastic talk. Just to say that we'll be taking questions once all of our speakers have completed their presentations. So please do, just to kind of reiterate what Irene said, use the Q&A tab to drop any burning questions that you might have in there, and we'll pick them up post talks. But meanwhile, I'm really delighted to introduce Magendy Maitreya, who is a transdisciplinary industrial designer, educator and researcher, and a committed advocate of socially conscious design, who has a special interest in advancing the developmental agenda in Africa. He is a professor of industrial design at Machakos University and president emeritus of the World Design Organization. Magendy, we're delighted to have you here.
Thank you, Susie. That was a great way to start the previous presentation by Hannah and her colleague. Maybe this is going to take us slightly into a different context. First of all, I'm not going to be presenting any slides. I'll speak. And if there's anything that is needs clarification, I'm happy to do that. So what's happening actually, as you mentioned, Victoria, at the beginning of your introduction, is that the life as we know it is completely disrupted. In Africa, it's potentially worse, because I think in Africa, the sense of community was still very strong. And when I say community, I don't mean virtual communities. I mean people basically getting together, working together, using popular modes of collective efficiency, whether it's in crafts or in this particular pandemic has done is made us realize just how fragile our tried and tested means of getting together actually is. But the paper that the chapter that I spoke to was about the maker movement in Africa. So I'll just segue into that. And what is happening is the combination of the physical contact that people are accustomed to with the new digital tools of production have created new opportunities for a lot of our makers. At the same time, we have witnessed something of a trend towards what we're calling prosumers, which is basically producer come consumer, not just the consumer in one clean category and a clean producer on the other. But through the maker movement, we have this prosumer kind of model that has emerged. And because it's ostensibly open source, very much like the previous presentation, people are able to hack and to rehash designs and also put back, contribute designs back onto the community. And it's connected all the way into Europe. So for example, we referenced in this chapter a gentleman known as Jesper, who was from Denmark, who runs the maker station there, and who was collaborating with Cape Townian-based makers. And then on the continent, there's a couple of hubs, including Nairobi, which is very near where I am, and to Ghana, Accra, Ghana, Cairo in Egypt, and a few other places that are quite interesting. But what is emerging, and maybe this is a challenge for us, maybe part of this conversation for me and the subsequent projects we'll be looking at is, there's been a strong emphasis on STEM by our policymakers and our leaders, and there's very little appreciation for the aim in STEAM, which is art and design kind of related subjects. So part of what is happening now is that the same makers become design activists, in that they're pushing to show that science and art, technology and art, engineering and art actually can come together to create something much more meaningful and richer than just straightforward science, dry science, as I'd call it, from my perspective, in the sense that art brings or lends soul to what the scientific, technological, and engineering and mathematical subjects are bringing to the fore. And then I conclude by suggesting actually that because Africa is leapfrogging in many ways, that this maker movement could become a model, a replicable model, that could see an emergence of a manufacturing kind of ethos, which I look forward to. And we've seen it happen in smaller scales, and we've seen it in some countries moving faster. And I've highlighted some of the interesting leapfrogging ideas that are coming out of the continent. I mentioned, for example, the drone port that is in Kigali, Rwanda, that is used to transport medications to rural areas. From that hub in Kigali, it's able to reach any part of the country within about 7 to 15 minutes. We've seen that really coming into the fore now that we have the lockdown because of COVID-19, that this is a means that is able to bridge those distances where previously it was merely an option, but it was more cost effective. Now it's become fundamentally useful. And so we start to see this kind of outside the box thinking taking effect. And we've seen other examples of leapfrogging all over the continent. And possibly what is now emerging is the synthesis of art and those traditional sciences. And I'd like just to end with one gentleman's name, and you can Google him up later. He's a Kenyan artist. You may have come across him, known as Cyrus Kabiru. Kabiru would be Kabiru, and his first name is Cyrus. And what he's done is he's come up with a whole range of artifacts around seeing things differently. And I think this would be a nice metaphor to end with as to how to look at Africa. First of all, from the outside looking into the continent, but more importantly, Africans are co-creating their own narrative by looking at things differently and looking at the world around them, as well as at the world at large, very differently. So I'd conclude for now, hoping that there'll be some questions that would guide a deeper interrogation of this kind of issues. And I've just spotted Saki get online. Hi, Saki, and welcome on board. So thank you, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank
you, Mugendi, for that perspective. And welcome, Saki. Glad to see you. Our next Hi. Our next presenter is Claire Reddington, the CEO of Watershed and visiting professor at the University of the West of England. She works with industry, academic, and creative partners from around the world to champion inclusion, support talent, and develop new ideas.
Hi, everyone. I am just going to share my slides. Oh, wrong one. Okay, great. So for the last 15 years, I've thought a lot about making spaces for work, how to make welcoming spaces, inclusive spaces, spaces where people feel like they can move around the furniture and rewrite the rules, where behaviors and dreams are valued alongside money and KPIs, where responsibility is balanced with permeability. So I'm going to talk about Watershed, a building you can see now in Bristol in the UK. And the slides that roll are really about the kind of capacities and behaviors I value in a place of work, and some of the projects that come out of the Pervasive Media Studio. So alongside where we work, I guess like everyone else, right now I'm thinking a lot about where we're not working. And some years ago, artist, friend, and Pervasive Media Studio resident Hazel Greer said that if there was some kind of terrible catastrophe or if a massive hurricane hit Bristol, she would go to Watershed, sit down and decide what to do. And I guess that's what I thought I would do too if there was a kind of catastrophe. I would head to Watershed, find the people I love and think with them about what we would do. But obviously we can't do that right now. So it's been fascinating to see the response of Watershed team and our community to continue that kind of feeling of togetherness online over the last 2 months. So I'm going to talk a bit about Pervasive Media Studio. That's Pervasive Media Studio, which is the focus of my chapter in Art Hack Practice. It always looks like that. They're always stood there. 12 years ago, we set up Pervasive Media Studio as part of Watershed, a cultural venue, a cinema, a bar, and event space. The studio is a co-working space for artists, academics, technologists, engineers, and much more. We have 45 desks and a community of up to over 350 people, and our work is mostly exploring human experience and creative technology. While the studio is usually a physical harborside space, right now, of course, it's online, featuring a program of workshops, talks, business support sessions, ways to connect and amplify the residents. The studio was set up with hardly any rules, just the principles or intentions to guide and stimulate a community of invention. So I'm going to try and think about how 2 of them translate to online. The main community principle, I guess, is curation. When we set up the studio, we wanted something purposefully curated to ensure a mix of community. Most co-working spaces are either focusing on cultural propositions or commercial propositions. We wanted to curate in both. We wanted to be open to creative practitioners from all art forms and to welcome both institutions and independent practitioners. We were hugely influenced by the work of John Seeley Brown, and his creation nets talk about the fact that if you want to make things differently in times of stress, you should work with people who are not like you. And it's really worth revisiting that at the moment, I think. Recently, studio resident Laura Kriefman of Hellion Trace wrote about the studio. At Pervasive Media Studio, no one's working on the same thing. Every conversation you have is from a point of unknowing. In a given day, you could have a conversation about new publishing techniques, new forms of documentary, tools for people with dementia, bone conductive gobstoppers, city change making. So we achieve curation through invites, through turning people down if we have too many people from a specific discipline, by ensuring the producers, the team members at the heart of the studio, come from different disciplines themselves. This curation and the refusal to sit in silos results in shared knowledge, collaboration, ideas, and opportunities. It makes for a resilience and a shortcutting of the reality of the size of many of our residents who are freelancers or micro companies. I expect it will help us to rearm and to re-equip ourselves for whatever comes next, for whatever the future brings, evolving into new spaces and new opportunities, not stuck in boxes, but used to being uncomfortable and uncertain and trying new things out. However, for curation to thrive, we need to meet new people, spot opportunities, make invites. The transactional linear characteristics of working in the online space don't seem suitable to accidents. So whilst we can sustain the diversity of our community during this time, I have doubts whether we'll be able to broaden it. Generosity and interruptibility are also key central values of the studio. They're written on the wall in welcome. We encourage people to interrupt each other, to find out what each other is working on. The studio thrives on the generosity of its community. We encompass that broadly: generosity of ideas, resources, events, sharing leads, working together, testing prototypes. It's written into our contracts. No money changes hands between ourselves, but we do ask people to circulate value through gifts, care, and stories, though they're not codified or counted per se. Again, we think it's extremely hard to replicate the nuanced, opportunistic, random value that interruptibility brings us. And again, the straightforward nature of the online space may not be designed for those kinds of creative collisions. Watershed and the Pervasive Media Studio are an exemplar of a mixed business model. We have an entrepreneurial spirit that has allowed us to grow, to hold space for an ecology of creativity and invention. We now find ourselves in a future without those same resources. Over half of our income has disappeared overnight. We have no imminent capital expansion. 65% of our staff are unable to work from home. Our predicted audience numbers for the autumn are about 25% of our usual business. But to finish, I guess I would say I found a glimmer of hope in thinking about our founding principles of curation, generosity, and interruptibility in terms of ability to think differently, to rewild imagination, to roll with the punches, if you like. As long as we can find ways to work together randomly, to be online together, I think we'll be able to get through. I'll end by mentioning a tweet that studio producer Victoria Tillotson said on the 6th of May. She said, "I've been okay so far, but today I'm really missing the Pervasive Media Studio. I'm hankering for unplanned chats by the coffee machine, unintentional kicking around of ideas, serendipity." And what followed was dozens of replies from studio residents inhabiting a kind of fantasy Pervasive Media Studio, a sort of old school text adventure that featured gossip, invention, fighting over the air conditioning. And of course, because it was the Pervasive Media Studio, it featured Port Wednesday, a regular ad hoc time to open a bottle of port on a Wednesday and share it with your neighbours. So I thought I would do that too now. Cheers.
Oh, I really wish that I had a glass of wine to cheers you back, Claire. You're making me jealous. Thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating, really fantastic. Loads of fruitful threads for discussion there. But moving on, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Tanya Ado to the discussion. Tanya is a coordinator of, and I will not pronounce this correctly, Tanya, so forgive me in advance, Cathedra Max for Transdiscipline Art and Technology in the National Autonomous University of Mexico. From 2007 to 2019, she was director of the Laboratorio, oh my God, my Irish accent is dreadful, Art Almeida in Mexico City, and I'm sure Tanya will help me by saying them in the correct way when she speaks, a space devoted to the exhibition and documentation of practices in the intersections between art and the diverse forms of knowledge, with a special emphasis on science and technology. Tanya Ado.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to be here talking with you, and it's amazing that it's just been like months since we finished our essays for this book, for this wonderful book from which I'm learning a lot. I'm still learning. And yes, just to talk about like the shifts that our workplaces had passed through these months. My focus on my essay in this book was interdisciplinary practices to track interdisciplinary hack style practices in Laboratorio Arte Alameda, a museum context. Can we go to the next slide, please? And the context of that space, and in terms of a workplace, I was in charge of this huge building, beautiful building, which is from the 16th century. It used to be a chapel, and also 40 workers. So in terms of the questions of this panel, it was a very, very different context. And after that, please, we go to the next. We started this place at the south of Mexico City named Placenta. This is an artist-run center that we started with Federico Hemer, an artist from here in Mexico. And we kept on with this tracking of hack style practices. This is more focused on creative processes and community processes. The slide from the picture on the right is part of the water community. We worked with a group of people and focused on the problematics relating to water and in Mexico City. But also in Placenta, we were very aware of the possible tipping points and the contingency, because Mexico City, as you know, we've been through just in 2017, a big earthquake, which changed everything. And then in 2019, we went also to a lockdown because of climate and pollution problems. So Placenta is also very aware of these possibilities that a big city can bring, like this one that we are living all together globally. So we are also moving Placenta online and starting to work, to shift to this online space. Can we go to the next one? And then I started working for UNAM, the National University, and the Cátedra Maxau. It's Cátedra is chair. And the chair is devoted to transdiscipline, art, and technology. And as in the essay, I tracked different collectives from Mexico and their work, like Colectivo Chipotle, Astrovandalistas, Interspecifics, and Music Makers Hack Lab. I would like to talk about the artists that we were we invited to El Aleph. This is a art and science festival that it's starting on the May 21st until May 31st. And we invited two artists. Can we go to the next? Well, the next one is my new workplace. This is my desk. What you would see if I share my desk right now. And the next one, this is Colectivo Electrobiota. Electrobiota are Gabriela Munguia and Lupita Chavez. They are two Mexican artists living and working in Buenos Aires. They finished their master thesis in UNTREF, the National University, February the 3rd. That's the name of the university in Buenos Aires. And there is a very interesting program there on electronic arts. So they finished their master thesis there, and they're continue to live in Buenos Aires, but they were invited to come to El Aleph, to this festival. And then we are now in this global lockdown, so they will not be able to come. And that's why I also choose this collective to talk about in this panel, because yeah, all the changes that this lockdown have brought to the project, they will not be able to come, but they were supposed to present. Can we go to the next and to the first video? This is the Rhizospheric lab that they will going to present in the festival, instead of the physical piece that they were going to show. So we will try in this lab that they will conduct to resemble, but to also to translate the lab that they were going to give physically with the present participants to the online space, and connect them with their own materials and plants and their rhizospheric context. No, the rhizosphere is this small membrane or brief membrane that connects us to the earth, no, soil and all the things as roots and plants that are there. Can we see the next video? This is Eisenia, the installation that they were supposed to show here. Now the installation will not be able to travel. But what we are trying to do is to, yes, translate that experience to the extent that is possible, because of course there is a lot of problems to translate this kind of events to the virtual realm. The piece will not be able to come. This piece is a 3D organic printer, a printer that gets its material from soil and this Eisenia worm. And that's a pity that we will not be able to have the printer here, but we will have the Rhizospheric lab, and we will try to do some practices. They work on with the idea of nature resilient forces. So that's what we are working at the workshop. And also with the idea of tentacular sorority. So participants will have to seek for some of the materials, the electronic materials, and also the live materials as plants or worms. And we will work with whatever they can find. And also, if it's possible for some of them to buy some electronic materials and build some sensors at their home. But this has been also, yes, I think that in these times that we are living, many of the knowledge that had emerged from bio art practices or electronic art practices will be, or are being very useful to think what is happening to all of us now, not just electronic artists or media artists. So that's what we are going to, or we will try to share with the participants in the workshops.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. Irene is going to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much all for your great introductory presentations. And so before, I just wanted to bring up one question that we have, and also before we go to Victoria introducing Garnet and Saki, our respondents, and of course going into the conversation. Also, I just wanted to remind you, if you want to post any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box and put questions there so that we can bring them up and during the conversation. And there is already a question for you, Claire, after your presentation from Steph Bolt. And so I'm just going to put it answer live. I think you can all see it now. And it says, she's asking if you could expand on our contracts. Are these special contracts or actual contracts, and how do you negotiate IP? Is this as a collective, as a commons, as a pervasive media studio, or how else does it work?
Yeah, so these are actual contracts, although I guess they would probably not stand up in a court of law because we don't exchange any money around them. And I believe that's what makes a contract a binding legal agreement. But in our contracts, in return for us gifting space and support to residents, they are asked to gift their generosity and interruptibility. So we sort of enshrine the values into our contract rather than the money. In terms of IP, we tend to, we don't take, Watershed and the Pervasive Media Studio never takes any IP of projects, even if we are involved in funding them. But we do help residents think about how they might think about their IP if they're collaborating together. So in general, it works in a foreground and background sense. If you bought the IP, you keep the IP. And that seems to work well. There's no commons because we're essentially not an institution.
Okay, thank you. And feel free to post any follow-up questions in the Q&A, any other questions in the Q&A. And if you're more comfortable with the chat, throw questions in the chat as well. That's fine. Okay, so we've heard from all of our panelists, and we're going to move now to our two respondents who will have a few minutes each to speak in response to the presentations before we open up the conversation to all of the panelists. And we'll move first to Garnet Hertz, who is Canada Research Chair in Design and Media Arts and Associate Professor in the Faculty of Design and Dynamic Media at Emily Carr University. He is known for his electronic artworks and is the creator of the Critical Making Zine series. And I'll hand it over to Garnet, but first I did want to say, just to clarify for attendees, that everyone that spoke previously has written a chapter for Art Hack Practice, and then the respondents are people from the greater field who are also contributors to this conversation. So go ahead, Garnet, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Victoria and Susie. It's super great to join you. And this is the first time that I've participated in kind of like a webcast kind of panel. So it's also nice to see how this goes. And it brings up an idea that I'd like to pose to everybody is this idea of community and how we're, I mean, it's, when hearing the presentations, it's they're all really fabulous, but I can't help but wonder what we're kind of all doing like over the summer or into the fall, and almost the elephant in the room of us kind of sitting in our houses or apartments and kind of like wondering, like a lot of the energy behind the book, the Art Hack Practice book and the maker stuff in general is the idea of community, and in so many ways this community is, it's not like it's evaporated, but it's been replaced by concerns about childcare, about domestic environments, about medical care, about sourdough bread. I mean, it's sort of been shifted in a lot of ways, and I can't help but wonder, like, what are we doing together to like how do we respond to the change in maybe not getting together for a while? I mean, I think this panel is a great indication and the book is a great indication of how community can be made. But I'm interested in hearing from people just briefly, like maybe one sentence or so, how, like what you're doing over the summer and how you've had to adjust your organizations and your initiatives to kind of respond to all of the lockdown. And just in closing, I can't help but think of this idea of crap futures by Julian Bleecker, not Julian Bleecker, but Julian Hanna, and the idea is basically that the future is maybe not really as fabulous as we had anticipated, and that you know, it's both not as glorious as we anticipated, and it's also maybe more boring and isolating than we had anticipated. So I'll leave that as my question to the panelists, and maybe to head into discussion. What are we doing over the short term to try to bring people together and to try to form a community in the context of what we're working with right now in our houses or garages or whatever. So.
Great. I think that's a great provocation, Garnet. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Does anybody from the panel want to take that question up in terms of how are we responding to the elephant in the room, which is lockdown, and the fact that our usual business as usual is not usual anymore? Hannah?
Yeah, well, thanks, Garnet. It's a great question. I mean, I have a background in museums, and at the moment, all the big museums are looking at the fact that even to just open up again is going to be a major operation, sort of getting water systems moving, getting toilets moving again, let alone wondering which visitors will come and what they'll be able to stand next to or touch or not touch. But in terms of data as culture, as we said in the presentation, we had to close an exhibition that we just opened pretty soon after opening it. But we do feel that the three works in it have a lot of resonance with what's going on. So Alistair Gentry's DocsBox looks at what data you share about yourself, and guess what? There's a massive conversation going on in the post-COVID landscape of what data you share about yourself, what health data, what tracing data, all of this. So we've put in an application for some extra funding, because we don't have the money to do this from our operational budgets, to get Alistair to re-script DocsBox. Now, DocsBox is a one-to-one performance documentary. So normally you sit in the presence of the artist about 2 feet away from him while he's dressed up and he has a sort of fake AI machine that's basically an iPad screen in a box that he made. But we've, in consultation with Alistair, talking about him creating a networked experience. So trying to explore whether a intimate networked event could be something that's meaningful to people. So within the funding, he would be re-scripting the work. So that's one thing. Then we're also looking at a downloadable version of Mood Pinball. Of course, in a post-COVID landscape, an interactive pinball machine might not be welcome in many places because everyone would be touching it to play it. So what's the thing we do? Get it all sort of individually on your phones. So the artists are looking at creating a downloadable version of it. There's loads of questions about who would download it and why, but I hope that, I think it's a fantastic work, and I think we've got to suck it and see. And then Mr. G's work, which is a sort of less obvious candidate for networked experience, but at the moment it's an animation where you see the original William Blake poem sort of animating through the various retranslations and mistranslations that Google Translate's AIs have applied to it through the process he set up. But we're talking to him. He is a stand-up poet. This is his first piece of work that doesn't involve him standing up and being with an audience, whether he might like to think about a theatrical version or a stand-up version of that. And if we get the funding, we'd like to talk to some theatre directors about ways that that might work. Would it work with people in multiple different places? So it's coming back to the network. Then alongside that, and another answer to a thing, one thing that Julie and I have discussed quite a lot is, you know, this notion of key workers and where we as arts producers or artists sit in key workers. And Harmeet Chagga Khan, one of the artists on Mood Pinball, is very interested in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And clearly, in the crisis moment that we've recently passed through, and we may be returning in a cyclical way, art doesn't have an awful lot in to play, obviously, in the physiological, in answering our physiological needs like shelter and food. But as you go up the hierarchy of needs, love and belonging, esteem, and I can't remember what the other one is. What is it? Self-actualization. The arts are absolutely essential. And I think it's really interesting how everything has been focused on what people might make and do at home, not just what they might consume, but how they might make. And I would really love to see a reorientation of artists as individual genius who, through their brilliance, is given permission to be a maker, to a culture where making is, you know, a part of being human, really.
Thank you, Hannah. They're really interesting thoughts. And I think that there's something definitely about the way in which people have had to pivot in the moment to kind of think about practices and artworks and how they can be experienced in the immediate, but then moving forward, actually, you know, how does that then move forward as these measures might continue into the future? Claire, I saw your hand raised. Would you like to give a response as well?
Yeah, I'll give a quick response. I guess I was in a meeting recently where Matthew Austin, who runs Make Festival, commented on this kind of notion of us all becoming competitively listing all of the ways that we are open right now in a kind of desperation to perform our necessity or something. So I won't do that, but I will say that I'm interested in the quiet ways we can be together to make community, the sort of ambient hanging out that the Pervasive Media Studio team have created. And I think one of the best things we've done so far is a kind of chat roulette networking system, which enables people to randomly be connected to another person for 5 minutes and then be booted off. And we're running monthly like Friday night drinking sessions with that, where people are really commenting on how much more inclusive they find it than real life networking, that they feel like they can really connect with people without having to walk up to a scary group of men in suits, and find new ways to connect. So I guess I'm hopeful that quiet randomness might be how we continue to think about community while still being on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So our final speaker of the evening is Saki Mafundikwe. Saki is a digital artist, a filmmaker and educator, and the founder of Ziva, the Zimbabwe Institute of Digital Arts. His book, African Alphabets, The Story of Writing in Africa, is an important contribution to the understanding and appreciation of indigenous African language and writing through topographical design. Welcome, Saki.
Thank you. First, I would like to apologize for being late. I blame it on my old school watch. I think the battery is low or something. It's now 30 minutes behind and I thought I was on time. So my apologies to everyone. As I was, after being invited by Victoria to this forum, I was thinking about it, what my contribution would be. I put down some notes, some thoughts, and I'll read from them so that I really get my point across. So the current state the world finds itself in really draws the line between the digital haves and the digital have-nots, who are in the majority. Zoom has become the de facto mode of communication for personal, educational, and business needs. This is enabled by good internet connections. in countries like mine, Zimbabwe, where internet is prohibitively expensive, and thanks to 18-hour per day power outages, well, you can just forget about it. It's not like my country is poor. Why? We're one of the world's top producers of gold, platinum, diamonds, and other minerals. But our Achilles heel, or our curse, is corrupt leadership. We went through 40 years of a brutal dictatorship that made the leaders billionaires, while the citizenry wallow in unimaginable poverty. As a result, the world turned its back on us. I ran a design and new media college for 20 years without a cent in funding, not a single cent. So while we ideate here about how to work in these crazy times, do not forget the masses for whom that question pales to their need for basics like food. When globalization was first mooted, it promised equality amongst the netizens, two-way exchanges of ideas between North and South, East and West, and so on. But from the get-go, the challenge was always the huge chasm of the digital divide. So I don't see that ever being rectified. And I have enjoyed what I saw of the presentations since my watch was responsible for me being late. And I can only wish, really, that maybe one day the digital divide will disappear and we can all partake in such exchanges on an equal footing. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Saki, for bringing up those important points about privilege and the question of where do we work and how it extends to people in all different types of situations across the world. Okay, so we're going to transition now into opening up this conversation to the whole panel. We do have a couple of questions that have come in via the Q&A. And then we have the many questions that have been raised by the diverse viewpoints of our panelists. So shall we start with, Irene, did you want to segue into some of the Q&A questions first?
Yeah, I think it's because, yeah, we have a couple of questions there. So maybe we can address these first. So Sophie Ashcroft was wondering if any of you have thoughts about how interactive works will be received or changed in a post-COVID world. And exactly that's something that we've been thinking as well at Future Everything, when people are, you know, just are so fed up with like being on facing a screen all the time. And then we maybe I'll go to the other question a bit after this, because it's looking at a different subject. So does anyone want to share anything on that?
Say something. It might not help. I've spoken to people in major museums about this, and nobody knows, because we don't know what the risks are at the moment, and we don't know how behaviors will have changed and how risk averse visitors will be. But I definitely think that the age of the VR headset is going to be quite dramatically challenged by this. But maybe that's no bad thing, you know, interrupting this grand march to harder and harder core tech. I mean, it could be interesting, but yeah.
I guess the interesting thing about that is how few people have them in their homes.
Right.
So March was around kind of the ability to experience VR in sort of exhibition spaces and galleries and places, and it hasn't been able to translate to a home entertainment experience in quite the same way. So that is why it's been so problematic.
But it's not just big tech, it's also interactives that use sand and beans and water, you know, like Wonder Lab at the Science Museum. How is that ever going to open again in this context? For those of you who don't know, it's, you know, it's physical phenomena and children touching things and making things go bang.
Is there a question around design here? I think I'd love to hear from Magendy around just kind of the role of design moving forward in a kind of post-COVID solution finding space for these kinds of issues.
Thanks, Susie. And thanks also, Saki. The comments you raised actually resonate quite a bit with what my experience is. I think, first of all, the appreciation that communities still have the essential need to cooperate and co-create is still there. I think digital tools have just allowed people to work across distances. And maybe this is ironic because I've been able to participate in much more geographically spread co-creative sessions than when we did not have this limitation of the physical contact. And as designers, I think what the contribution I'd like to make here is we're entering into unknown territory. We need to adopt a mindset of, as design thinking would kind of posit, where we co-create and prototype and pilot ideas together without promising anyone of any certainty in terms of outcomes. I think the truth of the matter is everything we're doing right now is very fluid. And the only thing I can say is that previously for us to physically collaborate, we had solidarity and we also had a generosity of spirit. But now one or two new values and virtues that have been added is one of empathy and humility. And I'd like to emphasize humility much more because empathy, I think, is straightforward from a design thinking perspective. The realization that this COVID-19 global pandemic is not a respecter of so-called developmental imperatives, whether one lives in the so-called developed parts of the world or the developing ones, has brought about a new sense of understanding of our limitations as human beings. And I think technology had previously been overrated, yet at the same time, and this is a paradox, it is technology that is showing us the way out of this particular dilemma we are in. So going forward, and maybe picking up on Saki's point again, we need to start to look at how we will not have perfect solutions, but in the spirit of design thinking, we can look towards what in Africa we refer to as a hybrid solution, one that picks high-tech and low-tech solutions and mixes them up, rehashes them, and makes them work for us. Some people will always have advantage when it comes to digital literacy and digital tools. Others are only scrapping at the bottom of the barrel, but wanting to get involved. And having hybridized kind of thinking allows for many more players to be in this space. Otherwise, if we pursue purist kind of thinking, we may exclude a lot of people who have a lot of creativity to offer. So as a designer, this is what I'd conclude, that we need to be open to co-creation, to ideating together. We need to be open to prototyping, and I talk about low-fi prototyping, not just the high-tech versions. And then we need to be open to piloting these ideas in the real world with the understanding that we may have to redesign them and reconstitute those solutions again.
That's fantastic. That's a really interesting response. I totally agree with you. Thinking not just from their kind of 3D printer perspective, but actually really thinking about co-creation and co-creation across the disciplines as well. I mean, I think one of the things from my side of things in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic is that it's cut through every aspect of society. It truly has shown up to be a wicked problem that I think definitely does need co-creation across industries, sectors, disciplines, forms of knowledge, and radically new ways of thinking and doing need to be established. Irene, is there any other? I think there's a couple of other questions that we could pick up.
Yes. So, and actually, sorry, and actually, Stacey was brought this up as well in terms of like what people have been saying, but also the, you know, these environments where most people here are working with, in terms of that thrive of sharing and interactions, but also interruptions, but also collaboration, co-creation, etc. How do we prepare the next generation of artists to feel comfortable and thrive in these environments that might be quite different to what they have been or we have been used to? And also Saki Beryl has a question for you as well, in terms of like if you have any examples to share for use of based on use of mobile phones in interesting ways, that or like lower tech kind of things that you can share with us.
Yeah, I think Kenya wrote the book on this. They created a mobile banking system called M-Pesa, and I think the many countries, other countries in Africa have emulated that, and that's when you basically everything is done on your phone, on your cell phone. All your banking, purchases, for everything really is done on the phone. That has really changed lives in Africa for the better, for the masses of the people. And I also will highlight Kenya and sort of like the proliferation of software development. For some reason, it's happening a lot there, even more in Kenya than in a larger country like South Africa. So for the rest of the countries in Africa, it's always the issue is always like capital, you know. That's a huge problem. It doesn't mean that people in Zimbabwe are not smart enough to create, but it's that thing that whole the capital thing, the base to start is always a problem. But yes, and we also notice that, like for instance, in Zimbabwe, there are no landlines anymore. Everything is just like cellular, which is a great way to communicate because the reach is much wider. I don't know if that answers the question.
Saki, can I just ask you what your cellular network is? Are you in terms of 3G, 4G, 5G, in terms of the development?
Oh, well, they say 4G, but usually when you actually are on the network, it's what's that called? Edge, I think, which is a lower a lower network. So it's not actually true. It's not truly 4G.
Claire, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
I was just going to answer Stacey's question about creating environments for future educations and for future generations. So I should have said the Pervasive Media Studio is a collaboration with the University of Bristol and the University of the West of England. So we have PhD students, master's students, undergraduates with us in the studio. And the thing, I sort of see an irony in your question, Stacey, because I think it's the further education institutions that are the places where the next generation of artists might not feel comfortable right now. And so actually kind of the ones that are collaborating with cultural organizations, which are creating neutral spaces, which are finding ways to bring co-creation into their syllabuses, are already kind of creating more useful, more relevant courses. That notion of sort of knowledge exchange is helpfully discredited these days, but something a lot more holistic feels like it exists, certainly in the studio, but in lots of places that all of us work in.
Go ahead, Hannah.
Yeah, just to add to that, in my broader consultancy work, I'm definitely hearing more and more from academic organizations who want to bring what they call arts-based learning, so critical thinking, thinking by making, more into traditionally academic or medical bioscience courses. It's really fascinating for me, having been to art school and not university, to sort of enter these conversations and try to imagine what they'll mean to artists as well. But one thing I haven't heard from is I haven't heard from any art schools about how they might be altering or changing. I'm sure there must be some lecturers here who might comment.
Yeah, I mean, if I can pitch in as a token lecturer, I mean, I think a lot of universities really are seeing their lives flash before their eyes at this point, and are very much concerned about what's going to happen come fall, because overnight their offerings become instantly less desirable, you know, and it's really a lot of people are losing sleep right now in universities, but yeah.
Irene, I know that we are getting close to time.
Can I just bring up another question, which is from Daniel, to who is kind of was asking like the differences in initiatives and also strengths and challenges that small or large organizations face, and what are the differences there? And yeah, so I wonder, yeah, if we can also hear from maybe Tanya or Julie, or yeah, people haven't spoken so much, so it'd be great to hear your thoughts as well. But I guess that's quite relevant in terms of us coming from a mix of maybe smaller, medium to smaller scale organizations, but it'd be great to hear your thoughts there, and we can wrap up.
Well, I think that, yes, for me, it's a very huge difference. And I really, yes, to being responsible of a space that is a building, an heritage building with workers. This is a huge responsibility in terms of care. And I am very grateful now that I'm in charge of a small project and an artist-run center, and this chair at the university, which has no office. It was already a virtual project. I can program in the university. I can use the university, and also like all the interdisciplinary possibilities and connections that you can make there. But yes, now it is that virtual project is also close to collapse. But I think we have many more opportunities when we are small, and even big institutions can act small and bridge and construct small projects that can do big networks. And also big institutions, I think they should do this, no? And local, and do big networks out of small projects. That's what I would say about big and small.
Well, I have a small art studio outside of London, where we do a lot of technology and art and technology work. And we're, because we are so small, it means when things like this happen, you realize the fragility of what you're relying on. So we've had a lot of public funding, and when you get public funding, there's no allowance to make any profit. There's no way to build up any reserves. So a small organization suddenly becomes very critical. But what it also gives you is the ability to be really fleet of foot and see things like this, not as a problem, but as a challenge, or just, they're just a new set of parameters like they would be for any other art project. So everything is changing, but if you've been practicing for 20 years, the parameters that I had back then and the way I communicated and networked with people were different to what they were before the lockdown, and now they're changing again. So it's just, it's just the case of reiterating, relearning what you're used to, and then changing and shifting. And if you're good at, we have to learn to let go of what we're used to. And the quicker you can let go, the quicker you can embrace the new ways, and then move forward, and then keep trying to change. And I'm just in the middle of reading a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. It's really great. And the quicker you can not give a fuck, the quicker you can be successful and move forward.
Hear, hear.
I think might be a great note to end on. Thank you all so much to our attendees, especially to those who are listening to us now, both on Facebook Live and those who have joined the Zoom discussion. We appreciate your time and hope that you've found some takeaways. We do have 2 more Future Focus Art Hack practice events, and I know Future Focus also has plans to extend in a variety of directions, which I'll leave to Irene to talk about. But I just wanted to thank you personally for the attendees for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria and Susie, for this. And of course, huge thanks to Hannah, Julie, Claire, Zenti, and Tanya, Garnet, and Saki as well for being here. And thank you to everyone in our audience, in our attendees. And I'm so sorry, it's so frustrating to not be able to see you, but maybe, hopefully in real life we will be able to kind of continue. But as Victoria was saying, we have 2 more sessions in the Art Hack practice series that we're going to kind of to announce very soon. So just keep in touch via our social media, website, etc. And also Future Focus is going to be an ongoing program. So as I said at the intro, we are looking to continue these conversations in terms of resilience, in terms of what we can learn from arts communities, from maker communities, artists, etc. In terms of doing things differently, thinking about care and maintenance of our societies, of our environment, etc. And we are very keen also to hear from you. So please feel free to contact us at Future Everything if you want to be involved in future sessions, if you want to collaborate with us, if you want to kind of give us feedback, etc. So thank you all for this session. And hopefully I'll see you all at the next event. And thank you again to all our attendees and panelists. And a big thanks to also my colleague George and my colleagues Claire and Chris for being somewhere at the back. I can't see them, but they are in the background, helping with all of this.
And a big thank you to you, Irene Papadimitriou, for your vision and for your energy and for your positivity, for bringing all of these fantastic networks together and creating a space for these kinds of insights to be shared. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We will get in touch for feedback via the registration. So so just very welcome to get feedback from everyone. So so thank you very much. Have a great evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, because I know people are from around the world. So and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Everyone, thanks.
Bye.
George?
Yeah, we still have 9 attendees. People are dropping out.
George, I think you just need to end the event.